In 2018, I became pregnant with my first child. I was really excited about it. I had always wanted to be a mom. As I got closer to giving birth, my anxiety got higher and higher. My adorable little girl-to-be terrified me. How was I going to be a mom to a little girl in this landscape? How was I going to live up to the life that my grandparents and parents had built for us? My grandfather was an immigrant and built a life in Canada with his wife and 3 daughters when he had no education and no family. My parents were amazing. They were there. They advocated for people with disabilities their whole life. They chose to work with people who were sick against a big company, and then they were there at 6 o'clock for dinner. Could I be not selfish? Could I build a legacy for my kids, just like one had been built for me? When I had Sabrina, I felt very scared. Again, I had trouble breastfeeding, and I thought that she was better off with somebody else. I was depressed. I thought that my anxiety in the past was a big, bad problem. But then here I was with this tiny, perfect human, and I didn't know what to do with her or myself. I felt like my job was to survive for her and not to survive for me. Every feeding, I would cry, and my nipples would bleed. My husband was the only one she would sleep on. I felt useless. At work, my employees said, "Take your time and go have your mat leave." I didn't want to. I wanted to get back to a place that I felt comfortable and safe. But that place was no longer comfortable and safe because they expected me to go be a mom. Over the past 4 years, I have learned that I can be proud of who I am, and that what my daughter needs, and now what my son needs, is me. Happy me, unhappy me, lying on the ground me, staring at the ceiling me. I know that they're seeing me coping with life, seeing me celebrate life, and seeing me in my best and worst, but still seeing me every day is the most important thing I can do. My priorities have changed. My self-care rituals have changed, and I still struggle. But what I know for sure is that happy parents who are willing to do the hard work mean happier children. When I had Benjamin, my second son, my second child, in the middle of a pandemic, my fear came back. My anxiety was strong. My job was to protect him, and I felt defenseless. This time, I acted differently. I planned for a night nurse. I planned for 18 days of sleep in those first couple of weeks. I budgeted for it. My husband and I slept in separate rooms, knowing that we were doing it as a means to an end so that we could both get the sleep we needed to be there. When those first 3 months ended, I felt the lump in my throat get smaller. We had made it. I increased my dosage on my medication a little bit when I felt the anger rise. For me, anger comes before depression. But it was not a disaster. I smelled my baby's head. I fed him his formula, and I stared at his fingers. I felt more grounded, and I felt more like myself. That's it.
Oh man, I'm holding back the tears. Thank you.
Was that enough?
See? We always
was it long enough? Was it long enough?
Yes, yes. Okay. It was, everything was good. I'm not editing this out either.
Okay.
So So many questions, but this is what I love about storytelling. It goes right in, right? Like get rid of all of the fluff, the roles that we play, who we are.
I wasn't
Business
sure if it was
owner.
enough of a story because I didn't know what the end was, but I was like, that's okay. Just write it down.
I'm pretty sure that this is how life goes.
Yeah.
We're like, is that the end? Is that the end? And yet this is not all of you, right? This is a moment. This is part of you. So thank you. Thank you. So let's dive into, I was writing so many things and it just makes so much sense around, especially the legacy that you want to leave your children, right? Like coming into this generation of legacy builders per se, however you want that to look, that pressure of legacy. And then when reality meets emotion and then all of that. So what do you think, what do you think the big difference for you, first child, second child, of like that moment when you were meeting your fear?
I didn't expect to have a second pregnancy in the middle of a pandemic. And I was angry about that. Anger is my sort of go-to feeling before I go into the dark place, the dark place. So I was angry because I had planned, with my therapist, with my support team, that I was going to set myself up for a healthier pregnancy the second time around. And then I was pregnant and it was a pandemic. And, I didn't mention that my husband got COVID while I was pregnant. And that was really, really terrifying. I've forgotten the question, but I guess the answer is that the fact that I had even planned with a support team, even though it was still not ideal circumstances, that was a huge shift in my attitude about what I needed to do to take care of myself so that I could take care of my children. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that I was worth the investment before that.
Yeah, that's such a big piece, right? People are like, invest, delegate, do all these things. And there's so much inner work that comes when you're like, what does that even mean? And the worthiness that comes to investing. Yes. Time, money, and energy. So do you remember that moment? So I'm going to bring you back to a moment. Yeah. Hopefully it's a good moment. Back to that moment when you could feel, so you were proactive the second time. You're like, I know what happened during the first time. How can I get ahead of this a little bit if it comes back? And then you're proactive. You have the night nurse. You have additional supports behind you, medication, all of that. The fear creeps back up the second time. When you met that fear, like people are always like, how do I get over my fear? I'm like, fear, you don't really get over it, in my opinion. You just create a new relationship with it. So how did you meet that fear the second time, or in general now?
So I think, so my second child is almost or just turned 10 months old. And I think I'm meeting the fear now. I think I really numbed myself for a year. So in those final months of pregnancy and those first few months postpartum, I was like, I'm not going to let myself fall hard, but I also didn't really let myself feel the highs of it. So, I'm not planning to have a third kid, but yes, I smelled Benjamin's hair and enjoyed it and soaked in those baby oxytocin and understood what that connection feels like. But I was also like, it's okay if you don't feel anything for a couple of months. It's okay. Just don't be mad at yourself that you don't feel anything. You're not the person who's necessarily going to feel like this overwhelming joy when the baby is handed to you. You're going to kind of be like, okay, I got to get to know you. So I think maybe expectation management around the size of my feelings prepared me to, I guess it's trusting that I'm going to feel what I'm going to feel when I'm going to feel it. And it's okay if that happens in its own time, because of course I love my children, but I need to come to that love and express that love in a way that's natural, not forced.
And how does that make so much sense? And I love how every time I ask this question to somebody, it's always very different because it's our own relationship to ourselves, right?
Yeah,
Knowing ourselves.
I didn't want to be mad at my feelings anymore. So it was like, okay, I'm not going to be distraught by those feelings. Nothing's wrong with me that I feel those things. I'm not elated right now. I'm not miserable right now. I'm neutral. I'm okay. Seeking that in the middle zone, I think got me through a very challenging, like, again, I think I numbed myself for a few months after we had Benjamin because my pregnancy didn't end, in my manifested version of baby number 2. My pregnancy was going to be like, okay, we're going to go on a baby moon and we're going to go travel with Sabrina before she becomes a big sister. And I'm going to take a bath all the time. And I'm going to like self-care. And then my husband got COVID. So weeks 38, 39, and 40, I didn't get to see a medical professional. I didn't have any appointments and we had to quarantine. So I didn't feel like a goddess of fertility at the end in the way that I had like planned. I was planning to feel like a goddess and I didn't. Yeah. So I think I felt a little bit robbed of that time, which I didn't expect.
I'm sure you also didn't plan to have your second child in the middle of a pandemic as well.
No. And in fact, it's very funny because my husband and I had talked about it and we were like, no, maybe we'll just wait until she's 4 and they'll just have a little bit of a bigger gap. And I was already pregnant.
Let's plan. So this comes to the conversation of control, right? Where we try to control things and try to control emotions or try to control outcomes. And there's like that letting go, surrendering. How do you walk that line of creating a plan? And I want to talk a little bit about business because I think there's a different element to this when, as a business owner, right? You are the CEO, correct?
Yes.
So when you're the CEO and you have people you're responsible for, and then you're experiencing this in your own life, I hate the question of how do you balance it all because it's the stupidest question ever. But what's your relationship with that power, like that control versus surrender?
It's not good. It's constantly fighting with each other. So I think having a second child changed it because I simply couldn't split myself as much anymore. Like I thought I was already challenged with that with 1, but now that there's 2, it's even more difficult to split myself into more pieces. So I would say that I surrender to needing rest way more easily because I know that if I don't, I won't get anything done the next day. And by anything, I mean, be pleasant with my daughter when she is getting dressed in the morning. The bar is a bit lower, let's be honest. And the bar is also higher in that I probably won't get as much done, but what I get done will probably be done better because I know that this is all I can do. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because I need to leave space for all the other things I care about too, beyond work. Or if it's the case that I'm giving as much as I can to my children and all I have left for work is this small space, then in that small space, I will create something great. But I don't have all the space and all the time. So it does have to be compartmentalized. And you gotta listen, I guess in terms of having a business, I had to know that I couldn't do everything anymore. And then I had to get very honest about who was helping me serve my goals or the business goals and who wasn't. Yeah. So it meant like removing people from my life more than anything else, because I realized in that crazy busy chaos that I love and that sometimes tortures me, it becomes very apparent who is not actually helping you once you're in that frenzy. you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this drama anymore. Go away.
Okay. So I find, especially the last few years, but in general, when you have children, a lot of people think you're lowering your ambition, you're lowering your goals and your expectation. But it's, to me, in my experience, it's like having children and having to like face your demons really puts you in the driver's seat of accelerated growth if you're willing to go through that emotionally uncomfortable tunnel, right? You're willing to have those emotionally uncomfortable conversations. What's working, what's not working, where's our goal, where are we going, who's going to get me there, and kind of like life proofing your business as well, which creates more sustainability. So yeah, is there anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, it becomes very apparent who's in your corner and who's not. And then you really can't avoid saying, this is not serving me. I mean, you can avoid it, of course, but I chose not to, because I always liken it to dating. Like once I knew that someone wasn't a good match for me, I'd be like, oh God, now I have to break up with them. And I'm like now realizing, you know, one long marriage later, I'm still breaking up with people and things that don't do this for me anymore. And once you realize that it's not going to work for you and it's hurting you, it's draining you, and look, there's things in life that are going to drain you. Like sometimes your kids are really tough and you're not going to break up with your kids, but the things that you can remove to make room for the things that energize you and bring you joy and allow you to create better outcomes for the people you want to create better outcomes for, you should get rid of those things so you can do the good things.
Yeah, I've had to have some of those conversations, especially this year, just getting clear. It's almost like energy, right? Like you bring somebody else on your team to elevate you, bring you to the next level, or you're repositioning things, restructuring. And you're like, oh, that's not working. Like, let's try, let's coach, oh, that's not working. That's not where I'm like, oh shit, here it comes. I
have this like very weird comment about this that I wasn't expecting to talk about today. And it's emotionally uncomfortable. So I had a strange, unfortunate experience with a high school teacher, a male high school teacher. And that's something I've talked a lot about with my therapist privately. And he actually reached out to me a few weeks ago. Wow. And it was extremely triggering. And I remember going to my husband and saying, like, do I just attract crappy people? Like, I've been trying to tell the universe, go away people that don't treat me well, go away people that don't create joy and energy, positive energy for me. And then he reaches out of the blue to be like, hey, remember me? I'm that creepy high school teacher who freaked you out. And I was mad at myself. Like, what is it about me? Because all I can control is me. What is it about me that attracts people who hurt me? And what do I need to change about my energy and it makes you want to not trust people, right? When you look at your patterns and realize that you've let people in that hurt you. And it's very, very confronting. And I still don't have the answers to that, other than to say that I am trying to listen to that inner voice sooner and be like, hey, I wonder if this man got back in touch with me to remind me that no one gets to tell me what I'm worth.
Ooh,
because 16-year-old Zoe didn't feel like that and let this teacher make her feel special.
Yeah.
Maybe I am ready to claim my own now.
Oh, that's so good.
I hope.
Yeah, because sometimes those things happen. Like, why am I attracting this energy right now? And then oftentimes I think, well, I get to choose. I get to have a boundary around this. Like, yeah, it triggered me, but maybe that was the wound coming to the surface of like, okay, are you ready? It's time.
Then you're faced with this choice, right? Like this email comes into your inbox from this unfortunate person. And for me, it was the person I just told you about, but let's just say it's an old client or a friend or whatever it is. And you have to say, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to pick up the phone and deal with this face on? Am I going to write an email back? Am I going to talk about it with my therapist? Am I going to sulk for the next 5 hours? Am I going to, how do you move out of that indecisive, scared state and into I am claiming my decision and this is how I'm handling it. And I want to keep getting better at that, because I will admit a few weeks ago, I was like, what the heck is this? And I felt myself getting dramatic. And I was mad at myself for getting dramatic. And then I was like, there was a part of me that wanted to write back and just say what I wanted to say. And then I was like, no, doing that and then waiting for a response again, it's not going to serve me. Don't write back. Don't do anything. Just do nothing.
You don't even deserve my reply.
Right. But I was like, the fact that I'm even thinking about replying makes me annoyed with myself.
More all growth opportunities.
It is.
So there's one thing that you said when you were telling your story, and I think this will, wrap this up like really nicely, because one, in this conversation, it's all about pulling back the curtains that nobody has their shit figured out. We're all working and processing through something. So when the perfectionist comes out in anyone's life, we really have to get clear and realize we're all working through something. We're all healing something. But Zoe, you said in your story, I don't know exactly what it was, but it's something about they deserve all of me. What is your definition of all of you?
I think you can lead a life that looks very polished and maybe lead even your children to believe that you're polished. And I think my hypothesis is that doesn't serve them. Yeah. It doesn't serve me, and it doesn't serve my kids to be polished. So if they can see me lying on the floor having a panic attack and then calling for help from my husband, and we all then talk about a good moment today, I think that will teach them how to get out of those moments for themselves, and that like those moments will happen and then mommy's still there on the other side, right? Like I'm just me and I am still loved. That's what I want, right? And that's what I want for them. So if I want that for them and I don't show that I'm willing to be loved fully as me, then they're not going to learn that they deserve to be loved fully as them.
I love that. I could talk to you forever. Where can people find you? What are you up to in your business? I know you have lots of magic brewing.
Well, you can find me. My favorite place to be found is LinkedIn. I'm just the most responsive there. And then you can find my publication is daddysdigest.com. And I'm trying to help men do this type of work too, because as uncomfortable as it is for me, it's a lot less uncomfortable for me than it is for a lot of men.
Yeah.
So helping men to talk about these uncomfortable moments and navigating parenthood is sort of, my life's work, shall we say, and creating space for men to talk and dads to talk, because I think it's more natural for us to come together and do this. And I want it to be more natural for men to do it too.
Yeah. You and I have talked in great length previous to this conversation about men and getting the support that they need. And that is one of the questions that I receive a lot is, where do we go for these resources, for my partner or my husband or my ex-husband or, my brother or my uncle or whoever it is. So, where do they go?
daddysdigest.com. And then if your partner is looking for a dad group, like a program where they can meet other dads, that's called mydadcave.com. And I'm building it. And I just can't wait to see how it all evolves, because I got one great husband over there who needs to talk too.
Yeah. I remember, I think I said this to you not too long ago recently, and I think it's because I have 3 boys, I'm the only female in the house, and I was always about like female empowerment and, equity and inclusion and, whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm a feminist. And then all of a sudden I'm like, no, this is like for everybody. And now I'm watching as my son, who's 17 years old, is growing into a man. And I'm seeing the social conditioning of emotions, and I can't do that. I need to be strong. That's weak, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no.
I was just talking to a dad who told me, Daddy, you didn't cry, so I don't want to cry.
Yeah.
And this is like a 7-year-old boy. And then apparently he went back to school and asked the other boys, and they were like, no, my dad doesn't cry either. And I'm not like going to go around being like, men, it's time to start crying. And how can we take a narrative that's comfortable for a lot of people and start to slowly shift it? Like, I don't need men to go have a sob fest on the football field, but we can start accessing some questions around why that is the way it is, and show fathers there's a way to start demonstrating those feelings in a way that's comfortable. And then maybe eventually they'll cry on the football field, but one step at a time.
Yeah. I think we're leading the way. Like, as women, the more open we are about mental and emotional health and challenges and asking for what we need and creating that and becoming it.
Yeah.
They are seeing the work that they're doing, and they're like, I want change too. And I feel it happening. I think 10 years down the road, the conversation is going to be very different, because 10 years ago, when I was talking about meditation and mindfulness, like, now it's mainstream. It will come. It's going to take a while, but the conversations are going to change.
And I think it does need to be sort of structured in a different way. Like, if it goes full woo-woo too fast for a man who's not used to it, it's very discerning. And that's like, someone said to me, oh, you run a man's dad's publication. What are you trying to do? Make men effeminate? And I was like, no, men are men and women are women. Like, we're different. Like, physiologically, we're different humans, we're different structures and all these different things. And we're all just humans who love our little humans and want to be as happy as we can and leave the best legacy. So every human needs help navigating that. And dads maybe in a different way than moms, and that's okay.
Thank you, Zoe. We could talk forever.
Thank you.
There it is. You just listened to the Emotionally Uncomfortable podcast. If you want to take this conversation to the next level, head on over to our private Facebook group community, heatherchauvin.com/Facebook. My last name is spelled CHAUVIN. That's heatherchauvin.com/Facebook. Or you can text the word Facebook to 313-710-5199. That's 313-710-5199. It's a U.S. phone number, and text message rates will apply. Also, if you are a huge fan of this show, please rate and review it on iTunes. Every review helps another woman like you take back control of how she wants to feel and become emotionally uncomfortable. I truly believe the better we feel, the more alive we become. This is how we are going to change the world. And if you've been watching me for a while, if you've been on the fence and you're curious, how can Heather help me? Head on over to heatherchauvin.com/work with me to check out my mastery and mastery business coaching programs. That's heatherchauvin.com/work with me.